exam and passed it, and worked the remaining 25 years as an attorney doing criminal law, and then most of my career doing workers' compensation, actually. But I have been involved in several high-profile cases, and we'll see if you can even hear me. But there's the Dorothea Puente case. I was a crime scene investigator on that case, and I like to brag that I found a crucial piece of evidence in that. And I was also involved in the I-5 Strangler case, where he eventually pled guilty to 9 rapes and murders. And I found the crucial piece of evidence that originally tied him up to the first murder they charged him with. And that's Roger Kibbe. Mr. Kibbe is no longer alive. He was in fact killed while he was in prison by another inmate. And I believe that was just this last year. That case is a popular case on YouTube under a bunch of different channels and several different versions. Most of them are slightly inaccurate, so they can tell a smoother story, but the basics in it is true. So basically, Roger Kibbe picked up a prostitute in Sacramento and took her to the, I believe it's Hagen Oaks golf course. I don't remember for sure. Just off of Interstate Business 80 and Auburn Boulevard. And he went onto the golf course parking lot and started putting handcuffs on her. Well, she didn't really like that, started screaming. And a sergeant that I actually started on the police department with, Dennis Kofelt, was sitting in the back of the golf course and heard the screams. Well, as he drove up, Kibbe saw him and took off and let her jump out of the car. Unfortunately, and Roger Kibbe could have gotten away with it because the sergeant stopped the prostitute to see exactly what was going on. And unfortunately, what he did was drive back into the golf course, which is a dead end. So by the time he realized it was a dead end, Dennis Kofelt had already interviewed the young lady and found out what he needed to, and pulled Mr. Kibbe over on Auburn Boulevard and called for cover. That night I was working in the area. This is in the north part of Sacramento as a crime scene investigator. And my wife, Vicki, was working in the same area. She actually got the call, so I went and covered her. At the time, she wasn't my wife. And so when we got to the scene, I heard what happened, and I decided I would go check to see if I could find anything that might have been disposed of. While driving across the freeway, I found a plastic baggie that contained, among other things, a garrote. I didn't know it was a garrote at the time because it was two dowels, round sticks, with a parachute cord wrapped around it. Unfortunately, a dildo, handcuff keys, and scissors. This was eventually referred to as the rape kit in his prosecution. I then went over to where he threw out the handcuffs, and another officer had already found him. So I fingerprinted the handcuffs and got his fingerprints on the handcuffs. And the thing to understand with these handcuffs is they're cheap handcuffs. Like a brand name was like JP back then, but I don't know what brand these were. But they had their own size handcuff keys. Most good handcuffs have a key that everybody's key will open for safety. And these, of course, had a larger diameter hole, and our handcuff keys wouldn't open them. So here we are back at Hunt Highway, and I'm going to turn left and go down Hunt Highway for a little bit, and then essentially turn down the side road and head home. So we had the handcuff keys tying in this baggie, the rape kit, tying him to the murders, and then I went back to the car and found the remainder of the plastic baggies that were of the same brand that I just found. And they charged him with attempted rape. None of us were aware of the I-5 Strangler murders. There were several of them known at the time, but nothing to tie into those. And then shortly after he was arrested, they found a prostitute up by Lake Tahoe outside Sacramento, like 90 miles. Raped and murdered. And in the area was parachute cord, which appeared to match the cord that I found. We also later found more of this parachute cord in the back of his other vehicle that was at home with his wife. Criminalists that compared the cord found that there was some blue paint transfer and other paint that isn't in the parachute cord. It had to have been put on there when it was sprayed. And the same paint was on all three cords, tying him directly to that murder. As a side note, when I actually testified in this case, at 2 different times, I was actually an assistant district attorney in Kern County at the time. And the jury, of course, found him guilty of that murder, rape and murder. They continued to investigate him, and in order to avoid the death penalty, he eventually pled guilty to 7 total murders. Now I'm coming up in traffic, so I'm going to stop talking so that I don't run into the vehicles. I don't know what's going on, but now I got a bike lane. And I don't have that big truck trying to take my lane. And hopefully no cars cut in front of me. One of the few advantages of riding a bike on heavy traffic where something has happened. Hopefully nothing serious. And it looks like it's in my lane. So I guess I will be working my way through. Crap. I guess I'm going to turn right here since they're not letting anybody through. Well, my ride is going to be shortened considerably. Man, I just turned into a headwind. Son of a gun. So let's see, back to Roger Kibbe now that I don't have to watch out, except for bicycles riding on the wrong side of the road. Anyhow, one of the murders was just so brazen, it's unbelievable. Actually, 2 of them. One, he picked up a prostitute in Stockton and made the agreement with her boyfriend, Pimp, and she was later found murdered. They couldn't identify him, but he was brought in as a suspect in that case and let go. When he was brought in as a suspect, according to the materials I read, his wife said, "Is this about the great murders in the East Bay area about 10 years prior to that, where he's a suspect in those series of murders because he was driving a vehicle that matched the description, just as in this case." Well, long story short, they let him go because they didn't have any evidence other than they should have realized he's probably the guy that's too much of a coincidence. And the girl's boyfriend that made the deal or approved it was actually a suspect in her murder because he flunked the polygraph test, which just shows you how reliable those stupid things can be. There's a reason why they're not admissible in court. So anyhow, there's that murder, but the other one is even more brazen. He's driving down Interstate 5 towards Stockton, and a mother and her daughter were in their car, which is either run out of gas or broken down. So he stopped to help. He actually took the mom, according to this other article I read, to a phone booth where she tried to call somebody but couldn't get a hold of them. So he drove him back to their car and explained that because he only had room for one passenger, he could take one of them, give them a ride home. So the mother was in agreement that the daughter would go. Well, guess what? The daughter was later found murdered, and that was the last the mother ever saw of her own daughter. Just imagine how bad she feels. That's how bold he was getting. Another one of the murders was a girl who actually had gone to some function in Sacramento and was given directions on how to get home, but got lost. And ended up going south, and her body was eventually found in the foothills around Sacramento. So they pinned at least 11 murders on him, and I'm sure he's guilty for the number of murders down in the East Bay Area at a minimum. The other thing that they found that was unusual, hence the scissors in the bag, was he liked to cut hair and clothing. Apparently this was a fetish from when he was a kid. It's really stupid, but I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but it actually was one of the ways of telling who he had killed, connecting them all to him. Just one really weird guy, and I believe, based on his wife, she either knew or was okay with what happened. Hopefully she was unaware of anything. She was never charged with anything, and that just goes to show you that it's just his fate that resulted in him getting caught. Just a series of events, but for it happening another way, he might never have been caught. So, for instance, if that sergeant hadn't been sitting in the parking lot, if he hadn't taken the wrong turn, if he hadn't thrown out the bag at the time that he did and actually tossed it when he went to over the freeway, might never have found the bag. The good work of the other people investigating the rapes and murders, at recognizing the person that was arrested and connecting the evidence found to the I-5 Strangler murders that they were eventually called. So that is probably my most famous case I was involved in because it's just, the story is so told so many ways. So I'm going to turn right here. This is Gary. We were on Gary once before, but now we're heading kind of due south on Gary. And we'll be at Hunt Highway in a couple of miles. It's got at least a nice bike lane. Okay, it's got a bike lane. Not the best bike lane in the world, and there's a lot of crap in it. But it is a bike lane. Once I get up here, turn left on Hunt Highway, head basically southeast on Hunt Highway. It's a diagonal highway. That Arizona says is not a highway, so they don't have to provide funds to repair it. It's now just a roadway. The part that I'm in of Arizona, this is the Queen Creek Santan Valley area. I don't know where Queen Creek begins and ends. It's a town